to episode 16 of the Lone Hockey Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about puck protection with contact. So, when talking about puck protection, the ability to hold pucks and be able to hold off defenders, and the ability to protect pucks and use puck positioning in a way that allows players to be able to advance pucks into space in their next sequence, and also at the same time understanding how to utilize puck protection to benefit themselves in certain situations. And a lot of puck protection stems from the ability to understand puck protection in corners and getting off the wall and pulling pucks from backhand to forehand to shift puck positioning. So there's a lot of different elements when applying the puck protection elements when there's players who are under pressure, and understanding how to maneuver in those situations and understanding how to utilize their lower and upper bodies, sometimes separate the two and separate their upper and lower body to be able to absorb the contact and be able to play at a pace that is beneficial, manipulative in their own way. And so when using puck protection in the corners, a big thing when it comes to puck protection is puck placement and understanding how to place the puck on the stick, and also being to place the puck in a way that allows the player to advance the puck into their next sequence, into their next space with much relative ease. So at the same time, if a player doesn't have good puck positioning, they're not able to understand what goes into puck placement and understanding how to leverage that next sequence, it's going to be much harder for them to try and escape those situations, and they might lose speed a little bit easier compared to if there's players who really understand the hockey sense elements into anticipating those next patterns and those oncoming patterns to be able to put pucks in a better space and then being able to absorb contact in a much more efficient way. So at the same time, we talk about getting off the wall, and a lot of getting off the wall stems from those puck positioning elements, but also stems from being able to understand how to utilize backhand to forehand, how to protect pucks, how to be able to maneuver with the stick, how to be able to shift that puck positioning to be able to drive through the contact, ride through the contact, and ride through the stick of the opponent. So that way the opponent can't defend so easily. And usually you'll see this a lot with the players with higher quality hockey sense, and sometimes bigger players who are able to fend off players much easier with their size. Yet at the same time, they understand the hockey sense elements and the timing elements that go into cutting through the hands, cutting through the stick of the defender. So that way they can throw them off and then throw them off balance, or they can throw them off their stick, throw them off their route, their timing, their feet positioning, whatever it may be in the circumstance, in the situation. It's very important for these players to be able to understand that. So being able to not lose speed is another important factor when it comes to getting off the wall and using puck protection with contact and being able to absorb that contact, because not losing speed allows the player to maintain cruising speed and maintain speed throughout the sequence as well. If they lose speed, then the defender is able to match it a lot easier in those situations, and they'll be able to match up one on one and be able to pin guys to the wall a little bit easier in their favor as well. So at the same time, being able to use core and lower body strength is another big component when it comes to using puck protection, and puck protection specifically with contact and with those contact sequences. And being able to understand how to use the core to be able to maintain that center of gravity, but also being able to use feet positioning and leg positioning to not be standing still all the time and being dynamic in terms of movement. So that way they can adapt, the players can adapt to their checkers and adapt to defensive players trying to pin them or trying to get inside their reach and disrupt the play with a stick on puck play, or trying to cut off the play with a physical element as well. So there's a lot of different elements that go into being efficient when it comes to puck handling, because being able to handle the puck becomes so much more important when you're talking about puck protection with contact, because you look at some of the role players who are fighters in today's game, and they might not be the best in terms of escapism when it comes to the corner sequences and 1v1 battles and being able to leverage 50-50s, because they don't understand puck positioning elements. They don't necessarily understand the hockey sense elements and the timing elements that go into puck handling. So that way they can absorb the contact, get out of the contact, and be able to extend the offense's own possessions in that regard as well. So sometimes fourth liners and bottom six players tend to struggle with it a little bit more compared to the favorable top six players who get more ice time and more reps and more sustainable amount of ice time in all situations as well. At the same time, some of these players aren't necessarily super skilled when it comes to these situations, and they just have to learn like anything else. But when I think of players who are really good at puck protection and being able to utilize that and absorb the contact really well. There's two players that come to mind for me from the Colorado Avalanche. One is Mikko Rantanen, the other is Val Nichushkin. And now these are two players who are very bigger players. I like to call them power skill players instead of power forwards because they're power forwards, but they also have a skill element to their games, each to their own game individually and respectively. Because when you're looking at Mikko Rantanen's game, a lot of his game is built off skill and will and being able to understand the puck handling elements, being able to use shifty skating. There's a little bit less of it in Nichushkin because he's not afraid of to be a type of player who can be a north-south guy. He can drive pucks in, he can drive pucks deep, he can outside in net lane drive. He can do all sorts of other things that are a little bit different. But Ranson's really skilled when it comes to the puck protection in small areas and understanding how to use his body, use his core, being able to shift puck positioning so that way he can hook passes around defenders or he can find ways to slip passes through seams, much more skilled playmaking elements. And then at the same time, he understands how to absorb contact in a way where he gets in a 50-50 battle. He's not phased by it because he understands how to leverage his hockey sense in a way that gives him timing advantages and also allows him to be able to get off the wall in certain situations, either as a puck carrier or a passer as well. Different elements go into the dynamic of those elements in terms of puck protection as well. But with Val Nichushkin, he's really skilled with his speed. And Val Nichushkin, especially off the rush, you see a lot of rush patterning and how he's able to control pucks with his leverage coming off the outside and being able to handle contact that way. That's one of his biggest strengths when it comes to puck protection under pressure and under contact is his ability to hold off defenders with speed because he's a bigger player and he understands how to use his feet and shift his feet and being able to leverage his leg position to get inside stance on defenders and being able to understand to how to utilize those different elements at higher tempos as well. So he's gotten much better over the years at being able to utilize that because compared to Dallas, he was playing in much less of a role, usually bottom nine, bottom six type role. Whereas in Colorado, when he's played consistently, he's played consistent top 6 minutes and he's usually played on the first power play unit as well. So he's really blossomed in Colorado when it comes to his actual potential and his full potential as a player. But you see the elements from his north-south patterning back in Dallas and how he was inefficient as a north-south player. And some of those elements have still stuck in Colorado, but now you've seen more offensive output and production and being able to link together certain sequences much better when it comes to Nichushkin's game and his overall game and his puck protection game as well. You see him extending possession inside the ozone really well, much better because he understands the positioning elements that go into protecting pucks along the wall, being able to extend plays low to high, being able to extend plays off the wall. So he's not just a north-south player; he's a lateral playmaker now who understands how to maneuver in those different situations, those different settings, and being able to absorb contact that way as well. Bounded Shuskin's a really interesting case study when it comes to that because again, he's really skilled at the net front as well with his inside positioning. He can get really good inside positioning and inside stance on defenders. So he leverages puck protection under contact that way as well because he understands how to get not only net front positioning, but also angle himself in a way where he can get a loose rebound on net very easily for himself. So he understands the positioning elements and the inside spacing elements. This could be off the rush at the net front. Specifically, those are two of his biggest strengths when it comes to absorbing contact and understanding how to use puck protection under pressure as well. So a lot of different elements go into that. And another example I think of is sometimes you don't necessarily think of smaller players as much when it comes to puck protection, but a recent example, a very recent example, because he's only played a handful of games in the NHL, but I think of Logan Stankoven. Logan Stankoven is playing for the Dallas Stars. He was a second round pick by them just a few short seasons ago. And how Logan Stankoven, how efficient he is at being able to utilize his smaller limbs because he's only 5'8", 5'9", I believe he's 5'8". And so with Stankoven, he's able to use his smaller limbs in a way where he can use escapability. At the same time, he understands how to use puck positioning. So when you combine those two, the smaller limbs and the puck positioning elements give him body position and puck protection advantages in smaller situations, small ice situations, because he has better escapability and he can escape those corner sequences much more efficiently. So you saw it sometimes in the regular season, late in the season when he was playing down the stretch after he got called up. He had some really good sequences playing with Jamie Benn and the efficiency. I believe Wyatt Johnson was on that line for a while as well. Might have been throughout the playoffs as well. But speaking of Stankoven and how well and how efficient he's able to utilize his smaller limbs, when you have that escapability factor, it gives him an actual puck protection advantage as a 5'8" player. Because Logan Stankoven, he can utilize those escapable elements to be able to create separation space for himself. So that's a favorable outcome for Stankoven because he understands how to apply those situations in those specific settings. So, and another example, when I think of elite puck protection players in the NHL nowadays, is by far one of the greatest players of all time, and he'll be a Hall of Fame player without an absolute doubt, is Sidney Crosby, Pittsburgh Penguins' first overall pick in 2005. How's Sidney Crosby, how he's able to fend off contact to not lose speed. And you'll see this on rush chances, but more specifically in 1v1 sequences, and how efficient he is absorbing contact below the top of the circles inside the offensive zone. And he's so elite at being able to understand leg positioning and being able to utilize his legs and specifically his lower body to angle his lower body in ways that give him distinct advantages in terms of puck protection and puck positioning. So that way he's able to not only advance pucks to his next sequence and be able to sometimes generate shots off those opportunities in that sequence. At the same time, he can use his positioning and use his center of gravity to be stronger in his core, maintain that core strength to extend play all the way through as well. So this is something that's really unique because you often see him you don't see him lose speed a ton when he's in those sequences, when he's in those one-on-one battles. Sometimes players tend to easily lose speed, especially slider players in terms of their frame. At the same time, Crosby is really strong when it comes to his overall frame, upper and lower body. So he's able to absorb the contact. He's able to ride off the contact. He can cut through sticks. He can cut through hands, and he can use his leg positioning in a way where he's not allowing defenders to go through him, stick on puck easily, or around him easily. So he's able to leverage himself in a way and leverage his hand positioning to fend off these opposing players at the same time. So there's a lot of different elements when we're talking about Crosby, how well he's able to absorb the contact. He's one of the best, if not the best in the league at doing it. And it really doesn't compare because, again, he's not necessarily a player that plays at a tempo like a Connor McDavid or Nathan MacKinnon. At the same time, he's so efficient when being able to absorb contact. He's so consistent when doing it and being able to get out of pressure successfully is that you're getting the consistency factor when he's absorbing contact and being able to utilize puck protection elements. And you've seen a lot of backhand goals from him over the years where he's able to hold off a defender and then roof a backhand shelf shot. So those are just examples of how well Crosby is able to execute and how he's able to execute through different sequences. Jonathan Toews is very similar in his prime years with the Chicago Blackhawks as well. Not necessarily on par with Crosby, but pretty close in terms of just puck protection elements and pretty similar in terms of how well he was able to utilize that core strength and that lower body strength to be able to hold off guys and be able to extend possession sequences inside the offensive zone. So Crosby, he's so efficient when it comes to puck positioning and placement. And we mentioned it briefly, but the puck placement is so important in today's game because being able to place pucks in areas that give the attacking player a favorable outcome for that next sequence and being able to potentially generate a shot, a pass, a play off the catch, whatever it may be, being able to generate off of that is so important, so crucial being able to extending the next play successfully. So Crosby does a really good job when it comes to both elements and specifically puck positioning as well. And so there's a lot of different elements that go into Crosby's puck protection as well. But one of the things I also noticed when it comes to him was the separation of the upper and the lower body when it comes to extending possession sequences and understanding how to shift his dynamic in a way. And Pavel Datsyuk did this as well. Pavel Datsyuk was really, really good at this. So this is what made him such a good puck protector and one of the best reasons why he was so efficient at being able to handle pucks and protect pucks so easily. One, because of his skill, but at the same time, you see the separation of his upper and his lower body. He had dynamic posture in terms of how he's utilizing both of those elements. So that way, he's able to incorporate a fake, a deception move, whatever it may be, to be able to throw off defenders and being able to extend those next sequences and being able to understand how to extend possession in general. Datsuk was a wizard when it came to understanding how to separate the upper and the lower body and how dynamic he really was at doing that over time. It was really sustainable in terms of his offensive output and his production in general as well.